Hey guys, this is Luca Pretolesi. We are in Las Vegas at Studio DMI with Digital Music Alliance and Fader Pro. Today we're going to talk about hybrid mixing and mastering. We have a great song. It's a dub song. It's called No Lie. We have vocals, but also we have a groovy track. We have a lot of underground and clean sounds combined. So it's going to be challenging, but it's going to be fun. Welcome. Doja from Dubs, it's a full mix and has 61 stems, which is pretty normal for a full mix. Beside the style of music, the artist, the content of the track, I really need to have a clear organization of my session. So for many years, I kind of like shape and change and tweak my template, my initial phase of the mix. Try to minimize the number of action that I need to do to understand the construction of the mix and maximize the time on the creative side. Decide what I want to do, and when I decide what I want to do, just do it instead of try to find the track what is placed on the session. The way that I organize my session is always the same. I place my rough mix on top of the session, and I start from drums, going into bass, synth, guitar, if I have guitars, effects, and vocals. Vocals including lead vocals and background vocals. And regardless if it's a mix with 10 tracks or 150 tracks, the flow is always the same. Today I'm mixing on Logic, and Logic give me a lot of interesting options, which is folders. That has nothing to do with busing. Folder allow me to put on the same space tracks that are part of the same family, in this case drums, and even if they're in the same folder, I still able to divide the kick as far as the busing to the low percussion to the high percussions. So that's the way I organize my session on Logic. For me, one of the easiest way to minimize the use of my eyes to read information on the tracks and get distracted is going by colors. So using always the same colors and apply the same colors not only on the actual region, but also on the tracks and also on the busing, like I have here on Logic at the end, and also of my meters allow me to really quick recognize where I'm working on it. And after a while, if I need to jump and skip through different parts of the tracks, colors allow me to really speed up the process. And then if I'm working with other people in the studio, instead of calling, hey, that's like cowbell or close the hi-hat, I can say, hey, the yellow, the brown, the blue, the purple. And then right away, we're looking the same thing, which is very important. So as far as the organization of the session, what you're looking right now, it's a full mix. But the starting point was very clear. I want to place my meters on my busing. So I want to be able to look the entire session and listening with the separation of each individual bus. And then for this, I use the Melda multi-analyzer. Allow me to just focus on particular buses or literally play all the buses at the same time and have one unique analyzer that show me the entire song at the same time, including the changes that I'm doing on the track since I'm placing my analyzer on my buses. If I decide to put the analyzer only on a particular sound, I can do it just dragging from the bus to the actual track. The multi-analyzer is pretty good for that. Going back to the actual track, when I start from the top to my drums, and again, that's actually a pretty smart feature on Logic. If I close my drum folder on my mix, it closed the folder for me. So I'm able to minimize the scrolling on my mixing part. So if I start the mix correctly, and I don't want to get started by vocal because I'm going to mix vocal 30 minutes from now, 1 hour from now, I might want to close the vocal and then allow me to have more space on the mix, focus on the area that I want to work on it. Now, as far as the busing, each group of sound, it's assigned to a bus and a folder. As far as the bus, all my buses, they're assigned to a different output on my DAW. If I mix on a hybrid setup like I'm doing today, if I mix entirely in the box, I don't change my busing at all. I want to be able to decide if one song is going to be mixed totally inside of the DAW, or if I want to go out on the analog domain. And that's going to change only on the output stage of each individual buses. Case of today, we're mixing on analog, and I'm splitting my buses in a way that usually it's always the same or have the same flow. But if I have a sound that I want to route through another bus, I might change it. As my standard flow, I route my drums to the Aurora converter. I route my synth, effects, and vocal to the Dangerous Convert 8. And then I use inserts on analog domain on those sounds. So now we organize our session. We also organize our busing as far as the output gear. So let's go over our DAs and let's see the flow from the analog side. So we have 2 Convert 8, 1 Convert 2, Lynx Aurora, and we have a 4-cell AD. Convert 8, it's a channel for mixing purpose that I'm using most of the time for synth, effects, and vocal. The Convert 8-2 is very simple. Its job is to send out the rough mix, if I have a reference, and the actual print of the mix. So that's for monitor purpose. The Convert 2, I'm using this only for laptop use, for a client mix they want to play without going through the chain of the actual mix. The 4-cell, it's an high quality AD converter I'm using to capture my mix at the end of my job. The Lynx Aurora is the drum, specifically drum converter. It's 16 output that I'm using 99% of the time for the drums. It has a specific characteristic on the sound. It's kind of raw. It's very, very good for that. Now, we have the sound out of the box through the converters. Now we are going to hit our stereo bus through summing. So we have 2 summing, left and right. That's the drum summing, and it's capturing the Aurora output just for drums use and bass sometimes. And then with the Maslick, which is a very transparent summing, and on this we capture the synths, the guitar, the effects, the vocals part of the mix. All those 2 units, they combine on the mastering console. Now, on a traditional use, a mastering console is used for mastering vinyls, CDs. In this hybrid environment, it's kind of like the centerpiece as a brain of the entire studio. So that's the monitor session of the mastering console, but that's also the inserts. So essentially is the hub or brain of the entire studio. So we hit the console, and on the console, without doing any mastering work, I do my first phase of stereo bus treatment. That for me, it's compression and EQ. And the compression EQ for me, it's something that I do at the beginning before I start my mix. I shape my mix into a compressor and EQ. If I do this totally in the box, I do essentially the same thing without going out. I route my buses to a stereo bus, and the stereo bus has some treatment. That's what I'm doing on the analog domain. From this point, I treat my drums. So drums, I use the Dangerous 2-Bus Plus. Has some interesting features. The fact that I can do a real analog mono, very different to do a mono in the box. I can color a little bit my sound. So I can use the parallel limiter that most of the time I use on percussion. I can use the transformer. I can also insert analog gear only on drums. And I like to do that a lot. And I usually have a combination of compression and EQ just for drums. I use the Errol mid-side unit that allow me to have inserts on the drums, and I have a mix of compression and EQ. other option that I have using the mid-side unit for Errol, I control mid-side on drums different than mid-side on the stereo bus. But we're going to talk more about this later. The drums specifically have particular EQ that I use and I change based on the track. And as you can see on the left rack, I have the Neumann 491A. They're pretty amazing. They have like kind of like a vintage late 70s sound, but they have a very open mid-range and a very transparent and glossy like top end. It's really, really nice on drums. So I'm gonna use this on this track on the drum bus. We're gonna go over this rack maybe later when I process the mix, but in general, what you see right now is this Neotech channel strip that I use in this track on guitars. Audio to channel of the Neumann they used in this track on the main lead synth vocal of the track. What you see here, it's my sidechain EQ. It doesn't have a sound on the mix. Its job is send to the detector, my compressor on my stereo bus, what I want to compress. And we're gonna talk a little bit more later what I'm doing with this. That's our mastering compressor. That's a Pendulum PL2 that we're gonna use on drums on this track and kick specifically. All right, let's talk about mastering. The pure mastering area of the console is this bay on my right side. And compressor is part of my stereo bus, but sometimes when I do purely mastering, I use this for mastering as well. I have a Dolby that I use sometimes. I have the Bex EQ that is always set as a final stage of my mastering. And I have the limiter and clipper from Better Maker that I like so much. All right, guys, let's go back to work.